Hiker fights off. Black bear barehanded. The injury photos are brutal. David Langley had always sought the quiet solitude of the mountains. The sun had barely risen, casting a muted orange glow across the valley, and the air was still crisp, untouched by the heat of the day. David moved steadily, making his way up a narrow trail that snaked along a steep cliffside. His pack was light, his pace slow but steady, the kind of hike he had done 1,000 times before. It was peaceful, serene even, until the silence shattered. Rustling noise behind him. David froze, every muscle locking into place as his instincts flared. A bear! He quickly scanned the forest, eyes darting to the tree line, but he saw nothing. He told himself it was just a deer, maybe a rabbit, but his gut told him otherwise. Before he could take another step, a dark shape lunged at him from the underbrush. It was fast. Too fast. David barely had time to react before the massive black bear collided with him, knocking him to the ground with a brutal force. The world spun as the bear's weight pinned him, its hot breath searing his face. He could feel the ground. Beneath him, rocks and dirt grinding into his back as the bear's paws raked through the air, claws extended. Instinct kicked in. Panic didn't have time to take root. David's hands shot up, trying to shield his face from the bear's jaws as they snapped just inches from his head. It was stronger than anything he had ever encountered, its power overwhelming. He felt the sharp pain of its claws graze his arm, the blood starting to flow, but he didn't stop. With every ounce of strength, David shoved his hands into the bear's chest, trying to push it off. But the beast was relentless. It roared, the sound echoing through the trees and pressed down harder. The weight was crushing. David's breath came in ragged gasps, but his mind was focused. He couldn't give in. He wouldn't. Through the blur of pain, David made one last desperate move. Using the force of his legs, he kicked out, landing a solid blow to the bear's ribs. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The bear paused, growling low in its throat, eyes locked onto David's with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. And then, in an instant, the bear stepped back, hesitating as if it recognized the fight in David. He wasn't an easy target. Not today, but the battle was far from over. David's mind raced as the bear hesitated, its massive body tense and coiled, ready to pounce again. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat an echo of his survival instincts kicking into high gear. The forest around him, so calm moments ago, now felt suffocating. The trees closing in, the sky a distant memory. His breath came in shallow gasps as he scrambled to his feet, his legs unsteady from the initial impact, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. The bear was still eyeing him, its large body rippling with muscle. Every nerve in David's body screamed for him to run, to get out of the way, but his survival instincts knew that wouldn't help. Running would trigger the chase, and he knew he couldn't outrun the bear. He had to fight. He had no other choice. The bear lunged again, faster than David anticipated. It knocked him off balance, sending him crashing to the ground once more. Pain shot through his shoulder as he hit the rocky trail. The bear's claws raked across his side, tearing through his jacket and skin like paper. He gritted his teeth against the sting, trying to roll out from under the beast's crushing weight. Blood oozed from his wounds, staining the earth beneath him. But there was no time to focus on the pain. He grabbed a nearby branch, a sturdy piece of wood lying just within reach. With a desperate grunt, David swung it at the bear's face, the sharp crack of impact ringing out as it struck the bear's snout. The bear growled, momentarily stunned, and David took the opening, shoving with all his might, pushing the creature off him. But the bear was relentless. It was in its nature to fight, to survive. It wasn't leaving until it had what it wanted. And right now, that was David. David scrambled back to his feet, heart racing as the bear circled him like a predator with a wounded prey. His mind was in overdrive, looking for an escape route, but the thick forest was no help. There was nowhere to run. The only way out was through. The bear came at him again, its claws extended, its teeth bared. This time, David didn't hesitate. With every ounce of energy he had left, he threw himself toward the bear, tackling it with the last remnants of his strength. The two of them crashed into the ground, rolling and thrashing in a blur of fur and blood. David fought like a man possessed, using every muscle in his body, every last bit of willpower to survive. The bear snapped its jaws at him, missing by inches as David twisted out of the way, his body aching from the force of each strike. He reached for the bear's throat, his fingers landing on its fur, and with a primal scream, he twisted, using every ounce of leverage to push the animal away. With a final guttural roar, the bear stumbled back, its eyes narrowing as it realized David wasn't going to give up. It hesitated for a moment, its breathing heavy, and then, with one last growl, it turned and retreated into the forest, disappearing into the shadows. David stood there, chest heaving, blood dripping down his body, his hands shaking. He had done it. He had survived, but the battle wasn't over, not yet. David collapsed to his knees, his body trembling from the brutal encounter. His chest rose and fell in rapid bursts, the pain from his wounds starting to catch up with him. Blood oozed from several gashes on his arms, legs, and torso, staining the ground beneath him. He could feel the sticky warmth of it as it dripped down his skin. The cold mountain air bit at his exposed flesh, but it did little to ease the burning. In his muscles, the raw ache that ran through every inch of him. His head spun as he tried to stay upright. His vision blurred, the edges of his sight darkening as the adrenaline slowly began to fade. He knew he couldn't stay here. He couldn't afford to pass out, not now. But his body felt like it was betraying him, and every movement felt like a struggle against the weight of the pain. He staggered to his feet, using a nearby tree to steady himself. His breath came in ragged gasps, but he focused on the task ahead. Survival. He had to get back to civilization. He had to get out of the woods before the blood loss took its toll. David glanced at the trail ahead. The bear was gone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it could return at any moment. He had no time to waste. His instincts screamed at him to move, to find shelter, to get to safety. He gripped the branch tightly, using it as a makeshift, walking stick as he began to limp down the narrow path. The forest seemed different now, darker, more oppressive. Every crack of a branch, every rustle in the trees felt like a potential threat. He couldn't trust his surroundings anymore. His body was battered, and his mind was starting to unravel under the weight of what had just happened. But through the haze of pain, he pushed forward. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as David stumbled along the trail. The ground beneath him grew slippery, the blood from his wounds leaving a trail behind him like a crimson path to his eventual fate. But he couldn't stop, he couldn't give in. His will to survive was stronger than the pain, stronger than the exhaustion pulling at his limbs. It wasn't until he reached the edge of the forest that he allowed himself to stop. The trees cleared, and David saw the distant outline of his truck parked on the edge of the trail. The sight should have been comforting, but it only reminded him of how close he had come to death. He took a shaky step forward, then another, before finally collapsing against the side of his truck. He could feel his strength draining, the world tilting around him. His vision flickered, and for a moment he thought he might black out. But he didn't. He stayed conscious, forcing himself to reach for the door handle and pull himself inside. The cold leather of the seat felt foreign against his wounded skin, but it was a relief to know that he had made it, that he had survived the bear attack, the fight for his life. David started the engine, his hands still trembling, as he gripped the steering wheel. The journey out of the wilderness was slow and painful, every bump in the road sending jolts of agony through his body, but he didn't care. He had made it. Against all odds, he had survived. As he drove, the images of the bear, the brutal struggle, replayed in his mind over and over. But now he could focus on the one thing that mattered. He was alive, and that, he knew, was a victory that no injury could take away. David's truck bounced along the rough dirt road, the jarring motions making his already fragile body tremble with pain. The smell of blood filled the air, mixing with the scent of gasoline and sweat. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white as his vision blurred in and out. Every mile felt like a battle, each bump in the road bringing a fresh wave of agony. His body was on fire, a burning, aching heat that seemed to come from the inside out, but he couldn't stop, not now, not when he was so close. The landscape outside his window was a blur of green and brown, the endless wilderness stretching around him, offering no comfort. The bear attack had been a reminder that nature was as dangerous as it was beautiful. He had known the wilderness intimately, respected it even. But now it felt different. It was a place where survival was never guaranteed, where you could be torn apart by the very land you had once trusted. David's pulse thudded painfully in his ears. His side burned where the bear had raked its claws, and his left arm throbbed with each movement. The blood loss was significant, and he could feel his strength draining with each passing minute. He had to get help, and fast, but he was alone. He gritted his teeth, trying to focus, pushing aside the fog that clouded his mind. His hands shook as he maneuvered the truck around a sharp curve. The road was long and treacherous, but he couldn't afford to slow down. His phone, dead in his pocket, was useless. The nearest town was miles away, and even if he made it there was no guarantee he'd find a doctor in time. The wilderness had claimed its price, and now it demanded payment. His thoughts drifted to the fight, the raw power of the bear, the pain, the struggle, the way his body had moved, reacting on pure instinct, each second a fight to survive. He hadn't given up. He couldn't. But the toll was evident now. His body was battered, bruised, and broken. And the photos, the brutal images of his injuries, the slashes across his torso, the deep gouges in his arms, would serve as a reminder of how close he had come to death. He had fought with everything he had, but it wasn't just his strength that had kept him alive. It was something else, a will to live, a primal urge to fight back, even when the odds were stacked against him. As David pulled into the parking lot of the small clinic in the town, he barely registered the familiar surroundings. The pain in his body had numbed his senses, and all he could focus on was the relief of being somewhere safe, somewhere human. He stumbled out of the truck, barely able to stand, his legs weak beneath him. Every step was a battle. His breath came in shallow gasps as he made his way to the entrance of the clinic, his body threatening to give out. The door swung open, and the receptionist's eyes widened when she saw him. "Jesus," she muttered, rushing to his side. "You need help?" David didn't have the strength to respond. He could barely keep his eyes open. The room spun, and everything went dark. David's vision swam in and out of focus as the bright overhead lights of the clinic flickered above him. His body felt weightless, suspended between the fog of exhaustion and the biting sting of pain. He could hear voices around him, the frantic rustling of paper, the soft beep of a monitor, but none of it seemed real. Everything felt distant, muffled, like he was submerged in water. "Stay with me, sir," a voice said, sharp and urgent. A pair of hands gripped his shoulders, guiding him back toward consciousness. David's eyelids fluttered open. The world around him was blurry, but he could make out the face of a nurse hovering over him, her expression full of concern. "You're safe now," she reassured him, though her voice trembled. "You're at the clinic. We're going to take care of you." But David couldn't focus on her words. His mind was elsewhere, haunted by the image of the bear, the raw power of it, the clash of survival, the claws, the teeth, the blood. He had made it out alive, but at what cost? The nurse moved quickly, her hands gentle but efficient as she began to clean his wounds. The pain of it was sharp, a reminder of the battle he had fought, a reminder that he was still alive, still here. "How?" he muttered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. The nurse paused, glancing down at the gashes and scratches that covered his body. "You were lucky," she said quietly. "The bear was relentless, but you fought back. You're lucky to be alive." David didn't know how he had done it, how he had fought off a black bear barehanded. But something inside him, some deep, primal instinct, had kicked in. In that moment of pure terror, when every fiber of his being screamed to run, he had chosen to fight. And it had worked. As the nurse worked, cleaning and dressing his wounds, David felt himself slowly sinking back into consciousness. The worst of the pain was subsiding, replaced by the throbbing ache of his injuries. His mind drifted, and he thought of the wilderness, the raw beauty of it, the danger that always lurked just out of sight. His life was forever changed. He had fought for his survival in a way he never thought possible. The scars on his body would remind him of that struggle, but they would also remind him of his strength, a strength he hadn't known he possessed until that moment. When the nurse finished, she stepped back, taking a breath. "You're going to need rest, plenty of it. And you'll need a lot of care over the next few weeks, but you're going to make it." David nodded slowly, still feeling the weight of what had happened, but a sense of peace settled over him. The wilderness had tried to take him, but he had survived. He wasn't just a hiker anymore. He was a survivor, and nothing would ever change that. As the nurse left to get the doctor, David closed his eyes, letting the darkness claim him once more. The pain was still there, but so was the undeniable truth. He had fought back. He had won.